Hello, everybody, and well, welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom. Let's get into it because, well, I wanted to connect some puzzle pieces here, and I just thought it was really interesting because they keep talking about the China 2030 plan, so on and so forth, which is quite comical and funny, so on and so forth. But let's get into it, shall we? So when it comes down to things like numerology and spirituality and then mathematics and everything else, and then of course the foundation and the layout of which things are made and what's respected, right? There's something that's funny about the China 2030 plan. Well, the first thing is that zero is always known as a placeholder in mathematics, right? So if you want to make a $1 bill into a $100 bill, you just add two zeros, so on and so forth. Now, the 2030 plan that adds up to five, what's so important about that, right? Well, let's talk about the number 25, right? The number 25, if you study gematria or whatever, adds up to the number 7, which is significant in the Book of the Dead if you study Egyptian history, so on and so forth, etc. But it gets interesting here because 250 years, which, by the way, the Marines will be celebrating their 250th birthday this year, I think. So 250, if you remember, there was a show called Avatar, The Last Avatar, or The Last Airbender, so on and so forth, right? And then there was one called The Book of Korra, right? If you look up the significance of the number 250, it talks about the Book of Korra, right? Now, 250 is also slang in meaning, how do I say this? A fool or an idiot in Chinese culture. So this is one of the things that is very interesting, right? Because think about it. I mean, we work 5 days a week and we get 2 days off, right? Now, where am I going with this? Well, we have five-pointed star on the American flag, which has 50 stars. 5 times 50 comes out to 250. Remember, the zero is just a placeholder, which is where I got the number 25 from, in the beginning. Now, if we look at the five-pointed star, if you're an art major, you know about Da Vinci and the Venturian Man and how it breaks down the head, the hands, and the feet, so on and so forth, along with the different dimensions of the body, how your foot is the same length as your forearm, so on and so forth. Someone who likes to go shopping can say that, your waist, all you have to do is take a pair of jeans and put it around like a cape like this, and the circumference of your neck is actually the circumference of your waist. And then, of course, if you look at things like if you studied, martial arts or whatever, or, any type of personal growth or the occult, you have earth, air, fire, and water and spirit. Now, what's interesting here is that, yes, it all makes sense to a certain point. But where are we on the timeline? Because time is, well, essentially, if you speak to a physicist or a scientist, they would say time is flexible and time is an illusion, right? And then, of course, we have the Gregorian calendar, which also has leap year. Now, if you're into spirituality, without that, we would actually be, if you ask ChatGPT, that is, because I did, I think it's the year 2022, which would be 222, which would be an angelic number for some people, so on and so forth. So you have to ask yourself, right? Are we in 2025, or are we 2022? Whose timeline, whose schedule, who's pulling the strings? And well, yeah, there's bricks and everything like that, but when it comes to understanding what's going on, is the joke on us or is the joke on them? Now, I may be a fool for asking questions and diving deeper, where people will say things like, oh, I know what you're doing already. We saw this already, blah, blah, blah. And you know what? That's great. I've seen Bugs Bunny, so on and so forth. I saw Space Jam, but LeBron James had no problem playing Space Jam in the remake. Just like the girl that did Snow White or The Little Mermaid had no problem doing that in the remake. So, I mean, if you did see it already, why go watch it again? Right? It all comes down to, well, where your perspective and your perceptions are, because, well, fear, that's one of the greatest tools anyone can use before, well, they attempt something else to do to you, right? Because people will use fear tactics to make someone look crazy, act crazy, etc. But if you look at Billy Carlson, Carson or whatever, or the History Channel that talks and debunks all these things, with Forbidden Knowledge, which is his YouTube channel. And then, of course, you have the History Channel that talks about ancient aliens and how these temples and everything was built. You have to ask more questions. I mean, look at Black Mirror. The truth is said in jest. They could get away with it as long as they tell you about it. Now, if they tell you about it in a creative way, did they get away with it if it still happens, and will you let it happen? That's the question. So I wanted to take the time to put this little puzzle piece in here. Maybe you guys could connect some more pieces, the ones that know everything already, that, say I know what you're doing or can hear stuff or like to snitch or whatever. Harry Potter, they talk about finding the golden snitch. And the interesting thing about Harry Potter and the four houses is that those are four different personality types that would correlate to, well, the disc profile or the four-letter code for the Myers-Briggs 16-digit code, so on and so forth, or 16-digit personality breakdown, right? So everybody has a belief system. Everybody has certain things. However, when you try to impede on someone's freedom, peace, and tranquility, and then restrict them from doing the very thing that they want to do, well, who's the enemy? Is it the person that's being the bully, saying, oh no, just blacklist them, so on and so forth, etc.? Or is it the person that's trying to remain in control and power, right? Which is very PC because, well, they do say we live in the Matrix type of world. Now, if you remember the Matrix, remember the birth of AI was humanity's downfall. And then they thought that they could beat AI. Well, what if they already had AI 20 years ago, and using predictive analytics, thanks to Google and everything else, they were able to manipulate everybody using that type of technology in their favor to say, yeah, just keep going, etc., blah, 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 blah. And, in the end, what happens, right? So take a look into that because that was a very interesting movie. Take a look at Black Mirror. I saw an episode which was very fascinating last night. And then what else? Oh, there's a TV show called The Librarian. You should definitely look at that because in there's a plethora of knowledge that you can achieve from it, right? And they talk about the Akashic Library and all these other stuff, right? But if you read books and understand, that's different than just reading the book or listening to it to get entertainment out of it. Remember, during the Great Depression, the thing that made the most money was entertainment, not anything else. And they led a lot of people back to factory work, which is what Trump was talking about when it comes to bringing, well, factory work back to America. Think about it. If you don't think we're in a depression right now, you should understand that the synonym for tax is also known as inflation. And for you programmers and developers and whatever, they would probably hide this as a sin tax, right? Or in religion, they say sin, which means to miss the mark, which Jordan Peterson says that's an archery term, right? So why is there an arc in there, right? Well, how do you shoot an arrow? You shoot it with a bow. Well, the only way for the bow to achieve its strength is to put an arc in it. Anyways, this has been another episode of Finding Freedom, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.